And while you're turning there, I want to tell you that in 1 year, Americans spent over 4.5 billion, with a B, 4.5 billion hours watching sexually explicit material on just one website. You know how long 4.5 billion hours is? It's 500,000 years. And in one 12-month period, this is just a couple of years ago. I don't have updated statistics for 2023, but in one 12-month period, Americans, us, spent 500,000 years viewing sexually explicit content online. You know how much the industry itself is worth? It's worth more than $100 billion. I can't comprehend $100 billion, but I do know that $100 billion is worth more than Hollywood, and it's worth more than the National Basketball Association, the National Football League, and Major League Baseball combined. That's what $100 billion is, and the sexually explicit industry is worth more than that. So what do you do with these numbers? And I'll tell you in a few minutes, it's going to get a little bit worse. But I wanted to start here, because 4.5 billion hours is a lot, right? 500,000 years is a lot of time. $100 billion is a lot of money to spend on something that Jesus clearly is against in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. Now, Jesus didn't have this particular industry to deal with. He didn't have, some of the things available that we have available today to talk about. But he did say in Matthew 5, verse 27, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. Great. That's a great first step. That's in line with the law. That's what the law of Moses prescribed. Don't commit adultery, because that's what they knew. That was easy for them to mark, easy for them to get a grasp on. I did it or I did not do it, great or not great. Jesus said it's deeper than that. It's bigger than that. I say to you that everybody who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And so then Jesus says if your right eye is what's causing you to sin, then tear that thing out and throw it away. It's better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, well, cut that thing off, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. And so Jesus is clearly condemning what we're talking about today. Yet we, and I'll say we as Americans, spend 4.5 billion hours, 500,000 years of time in 1 year consuming this content. And it's worth $100 billion. So if it's so rampant and so available and so mainstream today, why was Jesus so serious about it? Why is lust such a big deal in the mind and in the teachings and the words of Jesus? And today, it is just common in our society. On the front end, probably ought to tell you, this is one of those sermons that may make you uncomfortable hearing it, may make me a little uncomfortable saying it. But it's one of the most important sermons that I'll probably ever preach. When people come to me and their house, their home, their family, their marriage is wrecked, I can't tell you how many times it starts here. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's other issues. I can't put a percentage on it, but most of the time, it's this one. When we talk about things in our society that wreck our homes and wreck our families and wreck our churches, we can talk about a lot of things. My experience has been none of them are as guilty of wrecking homes, marriages, churches as the poison that we are talking about today. Why is lust such a big deal? Let's talk about what it is. When we're talking about lust, we need to define our terms, as we've done in every series that we've had in this poison series. And again, I call it poison because a little bit gets in and it can hurt us, but a little bit gets in and maybe we become a little bit immune to it. We're inoculated to it a little bit. A little bit didn't hurt me so much, and then I need a little bit more, and it grows and grows, and we'll talk about that. But that's why it's poison. And this one is lust. And a traditional definition of lust would be something like excessive desires or cravings, an especially intense desire. Well, okay, I can lust for different things in life then, right? I can lust to go home and watch TV this afternoon if I have an excessive or intense desire or craving to catch a game on the TV this afternoon. I can lust for that. But you know that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a more specific definition of lust that's also on the screen. It's the disordered desire of sexual temptation. This is the one that gets us. The disordered desire of sexual temptation is what wrecks our families and our homes and our marriages and a lot of times our churches. It's all over the news and it's all up in our experiences. This is the Greek word porneia. This is the Latin word fornicatio. This is the English word lust. Disordered desires of sexual temptation. Now, let me say on the front end, this is a tough subject because sexual desire is not bad. I don't want you to come here and listen and think that all desire is bad. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying it's like nitroglycerin. Some of you probably have some nitroglycerin in your pocket today, am I right? And so on one hand, nitroglycerin can heal a heart. It can be a good thing. But on the other hand, it can blow up bridges, right? So nitroglycerin can both heal things and destroy things at the same time. The same is true of our desires. Scripture is absolutely clear that sexual desire, drive, is God-given. He says in the very beginning, Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, that this desire is good because it leads to a more intimate relationship between a man and a woman. In the words of Genesis, the two shall become one flesh. And those two separate human beings become one flesh because of desire, because what we call passion. And so it's good for people to be drawn together in this. In Genesis 1, verse 28, it's good for procreation. I mean, very clearly, the Genesis mandate is to go, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Well, you're fruitful and you multiply because of sexual desire. It's good for intimacy between people. It's good for procreation. There's an entire book of your Bible, Song of Solomon, that reminds us that it's good for recreation, that it's good. It's good. Sexual desires are God-given things in our lives. We're talking about when those desires go from healing hearts, nitroglycerin, to destroying bridges, blowing up bridges, nitroglycerin. When sexual desires become disordered, they deform us into something that we were never intended to become. Almost universally, that happens as a sin of weakness, not malice. Again, nobody wakes up and says, today's the day that I'm going to start the journey to destroying my family and wrecking my marriage. Nobody does that. Nobody wakes up and says, today's the day that I take the first step in a crippling addiction that will bother me for the rest of my life. Nobody does it. It almost always begins by being carried away in a moment of passion. And then it happens again. And then it happens again. And before you know it, you've created a habit in your life. And a habit like this in your life is very hard to overcome once that habit is formed. And finally, lust becomes this unwanted monster in your life that takes over a person's life. And you want to escape, but you just can't seem to outrun it. And it's gone from healing hearts, passion has, to destroying whatever was good in your life. Relationship with your spouse, relationship with your kids, the happy home that you envisioned. It's blown up because of this particular poison. Here's why it's dangerous. Number one is because it's very unrealistic. The sexuality that's portrayed in music videos and romance novels, ads on TV, video games that our kids are playing, movies, is unrealistic. And those unrealistic images or shots or videos, whatever they are, it cultivates our imagination. And you start thinking about it. And you keep tossing it around in your head, this unrealistic view. It shapes your attitudes, shapes how you think. And those begin to influence our desires. And so you begin to desire something that is fundamentally unrealistic in life. And so the images are not real, but they're alluring enough to make us forsake reality and chase what that unrealistic image promises. And so, women may be smitten with the hero of the novel or smitten with the hero of the show that they've been watching, finds her husband inadequate and pretty much dissatisfying. And they didn't wake up one morning and say, today's the day that I start the journey of finding my spouse unsatisfying. It just happened. And that's why lust is dangerous. It's the man who spends too much time watching unrealistic or photoshopped or otherwise enhanced women, and they find themselves longing for something that turns them on more than the, in their mind, imperfect woman that they're married to. And again, nobody woke up one morning and said, today's the day that I start this journey of finding my wife unattractive. It just happened. What sexual images have we accumulated in our minds because of what we view, because of what we watch? What images are ingrained in our minds? What have we memorized because of what we view and what we watch? It's unrealistic, and those unrealistic images make us have a little disdain for what is real in our lives. It's dangerous. It's also dangerous because it leaves us wanting more. The more that we pursue something for pleasure, the less likely we are to receive that pleasure from what we're seeking, right? And so we need more, and we need more, and we need more. The way it works with this is that sexual gratification tends to lose its effectiveness, and so you end up needing and wanting more and more and more. And so what used to be intoxicating becomes dull. What you used to find very enjoyable becomes very boring to you, and so you need more, and the habits grow, and you need more, and the habit gets worse, and it gets more time involved, and it happens more often, and so you always need more and more and more to feel the same high. Third, it kills relationships because lust moves us from a love for others. That's Christianity. Love your neighbor as yourself, including your spouse. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, love your husbands. Lust moves us from loving others to just seeking individual gratification, only concerned with personal stimulation. And that self-focused view is what cuts us off from the potential of having a good relationship with somebody else. We end up, a lot of times, forming relationships with the person on the screen or the person in the pages than the person across the table from us. It kills relationships. The fourth one on your screen is new, and I'm convinced this is what makes it so dangerous for us today. When I said there are a lot of issues that affect families, a lot of issues that are destroying families, this is number one in my experience. Number 4 on the list is why, right? Yes, unrealistic is an issue. Always needing more is an issue, but it's not new. Kills relationships is an issue, but that's not new either. Always available is a relatively new thing. Before we talk about what it means for us, I want to bring you back about 1900 years or so to a man named Origen. Origen lived from the year 185 to the year 254. He's a great Christian writer. And he wrote a commentary on the Song of Solomon, which is that one book in your Bible that's about the pleasures of sexual desire. And here's what he says about the Song of Solomon. He says, I advise and counsel everyone. This is a great Christian writer. I advise and counsel everyone who has not ceased to feel the passion of bodily nature. You still got passions. I counsel everybody who's still got passions to refrain completely from reading this little book and the things that will be said about it. He's saying, don't read my commentary or the book. For they say that with the Hebrews also care is taken to allow no one even to hold this book in his hands who has not reached a full and ripe age. What Origen is saying, and again, this is a lot of years ago, all right? What Origen is saying is that I'm not so sure that with the content of the Song of Solomon, we should be giving this to our young people. The folks who are still driven by their passions, by their desires and their cravings, I'm not so sure we should be giving this book of the Bible, and especially this commentary on that book of the Bible, to our young people. That's ancient wisdom. And today, we give our teenagers and our younger than teenagers smartphones with unbridled, passcode protected, private access to whatever in the world their little heart desires. And I got to tell you, a lot of times their little heart desires things that they shouldn't desire. And we wonder what's wrong. In 1 month, in 2022, just one explicit website was visited 10.2 billion times. In 1 month, in the United States of America, just one sexually explicit website was visited 10.2 billion times. It was the fourth most popular destination on the internet. Google, YouTube, I don't know what else, and then this particular website. What's scary about it is that 97% of those 10.2 billion visits came from smartphones. Origen says, I'm not so sure we should let our little kids read the Song of Solomon, and I'm not so sure they should read the commentary on that book of the Bible. And in 2024, we're saying, hey, here's unbridled, passcode protected, private access to whatever in the world you want. Oh, what kind of habits are they forming? What kind of desires are they fueling? And I'm not just talking about kids. I'm talking about all of us. Kids didn't make up that 97%. Kids and adults did. They can't track, underage use. It would be illegal, I think, to do that. But the majority of that 97% is 18 to 40-year-olds. It's not the only part of it, but it's the majority of it. What kind of habits are we forming in our minds? What kind of desires are we fueling in our minds? What kind of unrealistic images are being plastered on our minds, on the minds of our kids, that will eventually lead them to a life of being unfulfilled in their marriage? How is 4.5 billion hours, 500,000 years, 97% of which comes on smartphones, 10.2 billion visits, how is it changing them? Man, I hope it's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. It was never supposed to be this way. It's unrealistic. It cuts off our ability to make relationships. It kills relationships, and it is always available. What kind of habits are we forming? Or are you one of the few that has enough self-control to say, I'm not going to get bogged down with that? Are you one of the many who legitimately has a problem with it? If so, Ephesians chapter 4, we'll talk a little bit about overcoming the problem. Just some surface level stuff here, and then we'll get to some practical ideas. But Ephesians 4, Paul hits on, and again, look, Paul's writing a couple thousand years ago. He didn't have an iPhone. He didn't have passcode protected, private, unbridled access to everything his little heart desires. The people that he's writing to and the people who are reading his letters, they didn't have iPhones. They don't know what's going on in this world today. But they knew something about it. Ephesians 4:17, this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They're darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardness of their hearts. And they have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. He didn't have a smartphone. He didn't have a $100 billion industry. He didn't have 4.5 billion hours a year. He didn't have all these things we've talked about, but he had a group of people that he described as futile, darkened, alienated from the life that they're supposed to be living. And he says one of the big reasons for that is that they have given themselves up to sensuality. Would you say that 10.2 billion visits in a month, 4.5 billion hours of consuming content in a year is giving ourselves up to sensuality? Because I would say that. I think Paul's talking about us. Ephesians 5, verse 3, he goes on and he says, sexual immorality and all impurity and covetousness must not even be named among you. Not only is it named among us, seems to be rampant. Let there be no filthiness, foolish talk, crude joking, which are out of place. Instead, let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral, impure, covetous, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. It's not the kind of life that we are supposed to be living. And so in Paul's language, we are to put off the old, which is lust, disordered desires regarding sexual temptation. Put off the old and to put on the new. And the new, the virtue that corresponds to the vice of lust is chastity. We don't talk about that word anymore. Chastity. Seems like an outdated word. Maybe we talk about purity at times. We don't talk about chastity. And that's simply fighting against the indulging of our lusts. Fighting against the indulging of our lusts and letting them become thoughts and letting them become actions and letting them turn into habits that consume us and drive us. A couple of ways biblically that we do that. And the first, the ancient way of overcoming these vices is the church. A loving family of Christians who love you and care about you and support you. But it's got to be a church of community, of openness, and accountability. Lust, you know this. Lust is especially a vice that thrives in isolation and privacy. It's the vice of shame. It's the vice that we don't want anybody to know about. And so it remains hidden in isolation and in privacy. And if you've tried to overcome it with willpower, maybe you've succeeded. My guess is that you have not succeeded with pure, simple willpower, because willpower with this one typically won't work. This is one of those that we know is a problem. We recognize that it's destructive. We even see the consequences of it in our lives. We know the families that have been wrecked. We know the marriages that have been broken up because of this particular problem, but we keep on going. And our drive for this overcomes what we know is better, what we know is right, and even our fear of consequences. And so engagement in a loving, life-giving community of Christians with stories of recovery from vices like this one, that may be the most effective way. By praying about it, and also having other people praying about it, being accountable to somebody about it. In my experience, practically, that's been the most effective way. Let me give you some more practical ideas. How about if we got screens where folks can access things? How about we use those screens only in public places? I know it's outdated, but make your kid put the phone to bed before they go to bed. How about that? That's an outdated idea, but it works. What about filters and blockers? You know, there are companies that do this. If you got a problem with this, is it worth $20 to have a filter, a blocker on your devices that will prevent you from accessing what you don't need to access, or will let your accountability partner know that you've attempted to access this so there can be a discussion there? That helps. I got a friend who makes his smartphone, he struggles with it. He makes his smartphone a dumb phone. He disables and deletes every app that seems to get him down. And what he ends up with is a phone that's able to call and text. Pretty good idea. Maybe a practical idea is to figure out what makes you vulnerable especially. Figure out the times when you're especially vulnerable and be on guard during that time. What is it that plants the seed of thought that grows into a desire that leads to an action that you want to overcome? Know when it's going to come and be on guard during that time. How about we don't live our lives on the edge of the cliff? How about we take some practical steps and stop lighting matches next to the gas can, or whatever metaphor you want to use. Those are two I came up with. But get away from the cliff. Get away from the gas can if you're going to start matches, if you're going to light matches. Get away from what tempts you. Jesus talked about, hey, if this is it for you, if lust is your problem, then pluck out your eye and cut off your right hand. If that's your issue, pluck out the eye and cut off your right hand. Just do it. And my guess is that we hear that word from Jesus and we wonder, why is he so serious about this? And whenever I say, maybe you get away from a smartphone device. You say, well, I can't do that. I can't run my life like that. Well, you can ruin your life. Or we say, disable all the apps that cause you problems. You say, well, that seems a little bit overboard, doesn't it? Accountability partner, I would rather pluck out my eye and cut off my right hand than have an accountability partner. Maybe. But you got to do something. Because this is the vice. This is the sexual problem that wrecks our homes, our families, our marriages, and as you've seen in the news, our churches. Guard what you let in your mind, because every bit of it changes how you think. What you let in is what will be in your mind. You'll throw it around. It'll influence your imagination. It'll influence your desires. It will lead to actions that become habits in your life. And so Paul tells the Philippians in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, to think about what they think about. He says, finally, whatever is true. And I got to tell you, a lot of the images that you may be seeing are not true images. Whatever is honorable, they're not honorable either. Whatever is just, it's a lot of injustice. Whatever is pure, you know it's not. Whatever is lovely and commendable, excellent, you know, the things that we're talking about today are none of those things. But I bet there's a large percentage of this group right now who has those images in our mind, in our thoughts. And when I say they become ingrained in your mind, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because you've allowed the things that are not true, the things that are fake, the things that are dishonorable, the things that are impure, the things that are not lovely, they're lustful. You've allowed those into your mind and you struggle with it every day. Paul's advice, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, is to flee, verse 18, from sexual immorality. Literally, turn and run from it. Turn and run from it. Flee it. Cut off your right hand. Pluck out your eye. Those are the instructions of Jesus and Paul. Would we be willing to at least consider some blockers on our phones, some filters for our phones? Would we at least be willing to get rid of the phone if that's what's causing us, to put the screens in a public place? Would we be willing to give the spouse access to our devices? Would we be willing to do some things that are a little bit short of cutting off your hand, plucking out your eye, but practical steps that are needed to overcome the dangerously destructive, poisonous vice of lust? Augustine wrote in about the 4th century, and here's what he said when he was talking about this particular vice of lust. This is, again, 1,600 years ago. He said, grant me chastity and restraint. I know it's a good thing. I know I should have this. Grant me chastity and restraint, but not yet. I want it, but I also don't want it. At least not right now. I'll put it off a little while. Is that where you are today? I know it's a bad thing. I know it's a dangerous thing. I know it's poisonous. I know that it could really impact me, and it could impact my family, it could impact my wife, and it could impact my kids, and it could impact my husband, and it could impact, the list is endless. And I know I should probably try to overcome it, and I should probably do a little bit better, and I should probably be a little bit more pure. Yeah, I'd like some more chastity and restraint and some willpower and some self-control. But not today. Because I'm not hurting anybody but myself, and it's really not that huge of an issue. I can stop whenever I want to. Well, later, when Augustine wanted to give up his lustful desires, he found that he couldn't, and he said, I am now imprisoned by the overwhelming force of habit. I am now imprisoned by the overwhelming force of habit. Is that where you are? If you're in that first stage of give me some restraint, give me some chastity so that I can stop this, but maybe not yet, I hope that you'll see the urgency of doing it right now. Because it won't be too long before if you let that kind of thing go, you, like Augustine, will be imprisoned by the overwhelming force of habit. That's the language, not the same language of Augustine, but it's the similar language that I hear people talk about when they're in the grips of the vice of lust. I'm an addict. I'm addicted. I know I need to stop. I know it's destructive, but I can't. And if you're there, please seek help. In a loving Christian community, people who will love you, care for you, build you up. In prayer, by having others pray for you, by doing whatever it takes. Cutting off the hand, plucking out the eye, turning and running away from it, whatever it takes. This is something that if it's a struggle for you, I want you to know that I'm willing to talk with you through this, and I'm not the expert on this, but I can point you to people who are. If this is an issue, let's get a hold on it while we're at the grant me the chastity and restraint, but not yet stage, before it gets to the I'm imprisoned by the force of habit stage. Now, I know what kind of sermon this is, and I know that in sermons like this, most people don't want to walk down the aisle. But I also know this is a problem. So public or not, we're going to have a song of invitation. Could this be day one of your process of overcoming this? Could this be your D-Day when you strike the decisive blow that begins to win the victory, the war against this vice of lust? You can do that privately just as well as publicly. You can do it publicly just as well as privately. But I want you to know that today needs to be the day that you start to overcome this. Maybe you're here and there's another issue on your mind, something else going on in your life, and you'd like us to be praying about that or to talk through that. Maybe you want to find me after we're done here today, and that would be good too. Happy to talk through any of these issues with anybody at absolutely any time. But if you have a need that you want to put before the church today, whether you're ready to become a Christian, you're ready to be baptized into Christ, wash off the old, begin becoming a new person in Christ, whether there's something else going on in your life, repentance, you want to be restored, maybe there's some prayer requests that you have. We sing an invitation song each week to invite you to come make those things known. While together we stand and sing the song to invite you.